This is Starting Point, a podcast that tracks Guyana's unprecedented growth from all vantage points. Join your hosts, Kiana Wilberg and Fariza Hanif, as they dive deep into the heart of topical issues.
Welcome to Starting Point. I am your host, Kiana Wilberg. Today, we engage a leader whose diplomatic acumen continues to position Guyana as a strategic voice in global affairs. Whether advancing international cooperation or defending Guyana's interests with clarity and conviction, her leadership at the United Nations has ensured that our nation is not only represented, but deeply respected. Ladies and gentlemen, she is Guyana's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Carolyn Rodrigues-Birkett. Ambassador, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Kiana, for having me.
So, Ambassador, before I dive into your stellar diplomatic career, I'm curious, as well as our audience, to get to know the woman behind it all. Now, you hail from Moruca. Tell us a bit about the community that raised you.
Well, thank you again for having me. And sometimes we say Moruca, sometimes we say Santa Rosa, because Santa Rosa is actually the legal name that's given in the Amerindian Act. And it is the largest Amerindian village in the entire country. And it was founded more than 150 years ago. And so that is where I was brought up until I was 16 when I moved to Georgetown. It is a beautiful community, beautiful people, and it's where my roots are.
What did you imagine your future would look like being a young girl, 16, 17?
Well, a little bit before 16, we had the class or the subject called guidance in school. And I was asked what I would like to be, and I said I would like to be a mother with 5 children.
Wow.
Because that was basically what you saw. If you were not a teacher or a nurse, the opportunities back then were limited. But as I matured to my late teens, I know that I wanted more than what Moruca had to offer. And that is why I had to depart for Georgetown to further my studies.
But based on my understanding of your background, you had a period of time where you were a teacher, correct?
Yes, it was in Santa Rosa. I was given a stint to teach for just over a year.
How old were you at the time?
I was 16 then, so
Oh.
I had to get to 16 because I was out of school before 16. We hadn't a secondary school at the time, and we had what you call the primary tops, which went up to Form 4. And so for the last 3 years or so of my schooling, we were in what you call the technical vocational subjects. So I did home economics and then handicraft and also industrial arts. At that time, we did welding and so on. But I think all of these things prepared me in a way. And so when I started teaching, it was we call it primary 3 at the time, preparing the children for primary 4 common entrance.
So all of the subjects,
yes, and
maths,
so I moved
English.
with them when they moved to from primary 3 to primary 4, teaching maths, social studies, science, and there was one more English. And but it was a time when teachers had to wait as a new teacher for 10, 11 months before you get paid. And I loved teaching when I did it, but again, I thought I needed to be more educated if I wanted to be something in this world, and if I was able to do that, I would be able to serve my community. I was thinking more about my community at the time, and not even wider Guyana.
So when you came to Georgetown, what was the next step for you?
When I came to Georgetown, I started to work for half day and go to school half day. So you would go to school in the morning. There was a place called Business Training Center on Kwamina Street. Incidentally, it is just parallel to where the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs is.
Wow.
And so every time I passed that spot, I remember my early days in the city. And there I learned typewriting, English for business communication, and that's what I did when I came. And just when I finished that, I was given a form by the former Minister of Amerindian Affairs. He wasn't minister then, Mr. Vibert de Souza, and he was part of the Guyana Organization of Indigenous Peoples. And they were told about a scholarship to Canada. And he had 2 forms, and I asked him for one, and I applied, and I got through with the scholarship for a year. It was just a year. He did not get through. So that's how I went to Canada for a year to the University of Regina. And part of the requirements of that was to come back to serve in your country with Indigenous people. So that was my basically little step into that direction of working with Indigenous peoples.
And what did that entail?
The work with Indigenous peoples.
The work with the Indigenous
I
people.
had to complete a research on teenage pregnancy. I chose that because it was something that was prevalent in the Indigenous communities that I know about. And I decided to do that. And so when I came back, I completed that paper, but I also was motivated to do more than that. And SIMAP was just starting an Indigenous peoples program.
And SIMAP
the Social Impact Amelioration Program. It was part of the structural adjustment that Guyana was going through. It was a government program funded by the IDB, World Bank, and other donors. And there was this Indigenous peoples program. And so I went there to work, and I spent the next 7 years there and loved it.
And I recall reading a July 2001 article published on the IDB's page where they spoke about your approach to project management. And you were referred to as the Iron Woman even back then. Can you give our audience a bit of insight into the approach that you had taken even back then in not mincing words and ensuring that you were a stickler for certain things?
Yes. Well, one of the things with SIMAP, as you rightly said, it was project-based. And you had a starting time and an ending time. And managers were kept to those starting time and ending time. And my boss at the time was Harry Naubat, who eventually became ambassador when I was minister. And so the approach had to be one where we ensure that the projects finish on time. And that IDB article was there, and they called me an Iron Woman there. I think that was a bit far-fetched. But it was because we were visiting one of the projects in Mabaruma, where you're from, and we had expected it to be far more advanced, and it wasn't. And so I was saying to the contractor that if you do not finish this project on time, we will have to terminate it and find someone else. And I was just about 21 at the time, so I thought they felt that this was a stern little lady here, and maybe that's why they call me that. But yes, it was that was the approach we took, and we tried to finish, even though it was projects in the Hinterland, we tried to finish them on time.
And how long did you stay with SIMAPs?
I stayed there until 2001, when I was appointed Minister of Amerindian Affairs.
How did your entry into politics happen? Did you, after working with SIMAPs, did a desire to be involved in politics, to serve at a different level, did that come to you? How did that happen?
When I worked at SIMAP, I realized that there were issues that we could not resolve with our projects.
Okay.
They were more structural.
Okay.
So, for example, we may have wanted to build a school in a particular place, but the land was not owned by the community. And then you had to go through a number of hoops to get that. And there wasn't, at the time, an accelerated program for lands to be granted to Indigenous communities. The government had already put a policy in place, but remember, we're talking in the early 90s where resources were scarce and so on. And I realized that the law did not support some of those things that we wanted to do. And during that process, I think it would have been in the 5th year or so, one of the consultants, actually staff from the IDB, he said to me, you should get into politics, because that is where you would be able to not just advocate for some of these structural changes, but you could perhaps be a part of the change. But I dismissed it because I always saw politics as in a negative way. And I remember my father used to say, there are two professions you shouldn't get into. They're both dangerous, just the same. One is politics, and the second one is drug dealing. So I guess that is how it was looked at.
Wow, yes.
And I never sought to join politics, but we were just going to elections a few months before 2001, and I received a call that the president would like to see me, President Jagdeo at the time. And I went to meet him, and he told me he was doing the list of candidates. I remember it like yesterday. It was him, Mr. Ramatar, who was General Secretary, and Dr. Luncheon, and Mr. Nabat went with me as well. And he told me he was doing the list of candidates, and he was looking for young people, he was looking for women, he was looking for indigenous people, because he wanted the list to be balanced. And I ticked some of those boxes, and he asked me if I could be on the list. I told him I have to get back to him. But he said if I don't hear from you by tomorrow, I would take that as a yes.
Wow,
And
okay.
then I was on the list, but I didn't think about it as being going to be a minister or anything. I thought it was just a list of candidates, maybe parliament, and we won elections, and then he called me again, and he asked me to be Minister of Amerindian Affairs. And I said, I don't think I can do it, and he said, yes, you can.
Wow.
You've done work in SIMAP, you can do this. And that was how I came into politics, this little 27-year-old girl from Moruca.
Reflecting on your career and your time as Minister of Amerindian Affairs, what are you most proud of?
I'm proud about a lot of things. But first, I would say when I came to Georgetown, and I would be walking down the street at the time from Kingston to the bus park, and people would say things to you, hey, Buck girl, how you doing? You know, we need a maid. We need a, you know, because it felt really degrading. And once I was in the position of minister, I thought we needed to have our collective self-esteem raised. And I say that because I know people like me who, when they were asked if they were Amerindian, they would say, I just have a little bit, because they did not want to own that part of the heritage because of how it was seen. And I thought if one of the things we can do is to build this collective esteem, we must be proud of who we are, then we must do that. And this is how we started this entire Amerindian Heritage Month of activities. Amerindian Heritage had started before, but the month of activities, if you go back into the history, you would see it was September 2001. And you would see that's when we started the pageant, that's when we started the entire exhibition for a week, and the activities started to grow from strength to strength. So I'm proud that today, people are not only proud to say they are Amerindian, those who do have a little bit that may look like you are also proud to say that they are Amerindian or they are indigenous. So I'm proud of that. Secondly, I'm proud about the Amerindian Act. The Amerindian Act gave our communities for the first time a number of rights that they did not have before. A veto on small and medium scale mining, a process that defines how they can obtain their title land, the ownership over the forests, all of the forests on title land that's owned by Amerindian communities. And today, Amerindian communities, Amerindian villages, they are the largest private landowners in Guyana as a collective. So I'm proud about that. And I'm proud about we were able to build a ministry. Yesterday, I went to see Honorable Minister Sarah Brown. It was the first time I went back to the ministry in that office, 17 years after 17 years when I left it. And it has grown. And to look at the young people working there and what they're doing there. But what has been happening over the years, because the PPP civic government, their commitment to Amerindian communities and the development of Amerindian communities is unquestioned. And I think that augurs well for us going forward. So there are lots of things to be proud about. And I'm proud that we have been able to move with the land issues, like I just mentioned, but move in a very important way, granting title. Even if we look around our neighborhood in the region, if we look at the countries surrounding Guyana, they have not granted title in the way we have done to our indigenous peoples. And sometimes we miss that here in Guyana, but I'm really proud of that.
Now, given your closeness and how much you were able to achieve with the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, How did it feel when you had to transition to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade?
Well, the backstory to that is when I joined as Minister of Amerindian Affairs, there were four things I went to the president with that, based on the manifesto and based on what we were saying in our campaign, I wanted the president to say, yes, you can move with this immediately, and then we'll do all the other paperwork and the other procedures and so on. And one was to get the Amerindian Act done. Two was to build a Ministry of Amerindian Affairs and staff it and put people in the hinterland regions as well. And three was to ensure that we start a countrywide training for our village councils. Those were and fourth, moving with a process on land issues. And President Jagdeo at the time, I remember him sitting with me and said, yes, run with these. So by 2006, those were finished. And I thought that I should move on to something else, and that a new minister coming to the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs may see other things that there to be done. It's just my personality that when you realize that you have done what you set out to do and you may want to move to something else, you should say that. And I told Dr. Luncheon at the time that I wanted to go back to study, and he said, no, you can't. And then President Jagdeo told me, I'll give you a challenge. And he offered me foreign affairs, and here I am today.
What was that experience like? What did it teach you? How did you feel in that field?
It was very new. I hadn't any background in diplomacy. But I remember Dr. Luncheon saying to me that the diplomacy you have to do with Amerindian communities, right, to move some of these things forward, it's already a lesson, and you would be able to do this in foreign affairs as well. And in foreign affairs, you have a very brilliant group of people working there. When I joined, I remember meeting with all of them, and they had all prepared briefs on every issue that we had to deal with. And I started doing that. I loved it very much. We were able to, during that time, we joined UNISUR. We were able to open embassies in South Africa, in Kuwait, the first time for us during that time for an embassy in Africa. In Kuwait, we were able to move to our commitments under the Treaty of Chaguaramas. We fulfilled 90% of that. All of this, because of the government's commitment to the region, but generally, even though resources were scarce, financial resources were scarce at the time, our diplomatic outreach, I think, was very good.
Ambassador, one of the things that I have long admired about you is the approach that you have to certain things. It's very temperate, and I also admire your love for heritage. And I noticed recently that you started to do a deeper dive into your ancestry. What motivated that, and what sort of discoveries have you made about yourself?
I was born into a family with a mother that had never met her parents and a father that had never met his dad. But here they were bringing up 9 of us as two parents. And there wasn't a lot of information at the time. My mother was adopted by a half-uncle, and my father grew up with his mother. And when my mother died, I did her eulogy, and I spoke about that. And I spoke about the fact that she came from a family of 6. And her father, who was from China, he left with the 2 eldest one. And her mother left for the UK with the 2 second ones, the third and fourth. And the last, the twin, my mother and her sister, they were adopted. And many people did not know that story. And my daughter found it fascinating, and she wanted us to search for our roots. And this is how I started during COVID, because she was able to find some information on the internet. And what I found was extremely fascinating in a matter of 24 hours, able to find my uncle living in Manchester, another one in Macau, the one who went back to China with my grandfather, and the other had died. And so I was able to find that part of the family. I so far haven't been able to find my father's part of the family. But it just goes to show the Guyanese society, we're people from all over the world. And I remember when I was speaking with my cousin in the UK, first time after now we've met as first cousins, and she said, we are people of so many different continents, and when you think about it, you have lots of people like that in Guyana. But I always believe that you must know where you come from in order for you to know where you want to go.
And speaking about where you want to go, you were able to break a glass ceiling. 7 distinguished Guyanese previously served as permanent representative to the United Nations. They were all men. You're the 8th and the first woman to serve in this position. And I'd love to know, what was your impression of going into this position for the first time? What were some of the lessons that you took with you? And what was your first year like?
Yes. I think when you're the first in anything, you have a responsibility to ensure that you're not the last, your gender in particular here. So if you're the first woman, you must pave the way for other women as well. And I was the first Minister of Amerindian Affairs that was a woman, and I was the first Minister of Foreign Affairs that was a woman, and now as well the first woman serving as the UN as her permanent representative. And I take those things very seriously, and I believe that every woman, we have 2 hands, and we must bring 2 other women up at least with us. And I'm very proud that at the permanent mission we're 90% women. At the mission.
I love that.
The Deputy Permanent Representative, Ambassador Trishala Prasad, and the political coordinator for our work on the Security Council, Ms. Nishanta Ben, and our Assistant Political Coordinator, Ms. Marissa Edwards. So you have me from Moruca, you have Nishanta from Essequibo, Marissa from Linden, Trishala from Georgetown.
Wow.
And then we have the others as well. And it was fascinating for many people on the council that we were almost 100% women. So much so that one country, I would not give the name on the program, but the ambassador came to me and he said, I'm ashamed that I only have people with mustache in my mission. So I've asked my capital for them to send at least 6 women. And he was able to have 6 women added to his delegation in New York. And that's just by looking at Guyana. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm happy and pleased and honored, actually, that President Ali asked me to serve as the ambassador in New York. The first year was very challenging on the one part because it was during COVID. And we were chairing the G77 at the time. So I came in October. We had 4 more months. We had to have a ministerial meeting of the G77. There were so many things happening. But we were able to do that because, like I said, we had a good team of people there, and good support from the ministry. Minister Todd as well had just come in as minister. And so we were able to do that. And we continue at the mission to do what we're supposed to do, and that is to represent the interests of Guyana.
Now, Guyana was also elected to the UN Security Council. For the benefit of our audience, can you explain what the mission or mandate is of that body and how many members? And can you tell us a little bit about the work that Guyana is doing?
Yes. We were elected, as you will recall, we had 191 of 192 votes. So we received the highest number of votes at that election in 2023. And so that told us that there was a lot of trust and confidence in us as a country, representing especially small states on the Security Council. That is a privilege and that is a burden because you're elected. And we went onto the council knowing that it is the most undemocratic body of the United Nations because it comprises 15 members, 5 that are permanent, and each one of those 5, they have a veto. That's the United States, China, Russia, the United Kingdom, and France. The other 10 are elected every 2 years, 10 elected members. So even if the council has 14 members supporting a resolution, one of those 5 could veto. So we know that. But we also know that not everything is vetoed on the Security Council. And the Council is responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security, which is the foundation of the UN. As you would recall, the UN was founded after World War II. And the Charter, the UN Charter, speaks at the very beginning that the United Nations is formed to prevent the scourge of war ever again. So the Council is extremely important, and it's the one body of the United Nations that when it makes a decision, it must be adhered to by the entire United Nations. So 15 members on the Council, whatever they do there, it ties everyone in the General Assembly, every other country. They have to abide with that decision. So it's the only lawmaking body of the United Nations, very important. And so we went there with our principles and with our voice. We were a small state. But small states, or being a small state, does not mean you have small ideas. In fact, small countries are the ones that I believe are the sticklers for multilateralism, because we realize that our destinies are tied with others as well. We do not have large militaries. And in this day and age, you do not have military solutions to conflict. So we know that very well. And we went on the Council with that. And every day we sit on the Council, we advocate for the Charter to be upheld. And included in that would be territorial integrity and sovereignty. We know our own position. International law as a whole, but also for international human rights law and humanitarian law to be upheld in conflict situations. And this is what we've been doing in the last 2 years, or the last 23 months. We have just about 1 more month on the Council to complete our tenure.
So even as a small state, as a non-permanent member, our leadership and our voice, it's respected at that body.
Yes. Even if I say so, and I would be biased, I know that our voice is respected, the voice of Guyana. Because the voice of Guyana, in addition to us, or me, or any one of the team speaking at the Security Council, we have to see this within the whole. When our president speaks, when our vice president speaks, when our minister speaks as well, we're all speaking the same language. It is Guyana. And we were able to have quite a bit of coverage during our time on the Council because of the positions we take. They were principled positions. We tried very, very hard to ensure we stick to our principles, even though the geopolitical context can be very difficult at times. And I'm very pleased that we have been able to do that by and large.
Now, you're also one to not mince your words, even at such an international stage or table. And I want to remind of an article that I read in 2024, where you resolutely abstained from a resolution regarding which did not unequivocally call for a ceasefire. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you took that position?
The resolution which was put forward at the time by the United States spoke about the recognition of the need for a ceasefire, words along that line. How the Council works, unless you say you demand a ceasefire, the warring parties don't have to stop what they're doing. And so we felt just to vote for a resolution that recognizes the imperative for a ceasefire and not call for a ceasefire is not something we could support. Why can't we just demand a ceasefire? You have to use the word, or you have to say decide, you know. And so that was one of our main contentions. And in the negotiations, because you have to negotiate the resolution, we raised this, several of the delegations, almost all, raised this issue. And then we saw in the mainstream media that they were saying that this resolution is calling for a ceasefire, and they cannot understand why some countries cannot support it. And that was a lie. It was not doing that. So we decided, with of course, the instruction of headquarters, we recommended abstention. I recommended abstention, and that was accepted by the government, that we do this. But we also have a responsibility to explain why we abstain. And if you would recall, you had countries who voted no.
Yes.
We were the only one who abstained.
Yes.
The resolution did not pass, but we held again to our principles. And that was early in our term on the Security Council. It was in April. And following that position that Guyana took, the world knew that Guyana was not going to be in the Security Council as a mere follower. They knew that, and I think that has served us well since then. But I would just add that we are also in a very highly political environment on the Security Council. And so there are times when you might support a resolution, but you would explain what you think could have made it better. And we've had situations like that as well.
Now, at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, we saw several nations making presentations stating that the United Nations had become unfit for purpose, that the wars that we are seeing, such as those in Gaza and in the Ukraine, it's evidence that the UN is not working as it should. What is Guyana's position?
Well, the first thing is the United Nations, it's us. The United Nations is made up of all the countries in the world. So when a country says the UN is not working for us, it means all of us need to examine what we are doing at the United Nations. However, the United Nations, the success of it or the failure of it is actually judged through the prism of the peace and security lens, through the Security Council. And so when the Security Council is not able to pass a resolution to stop the war in Gaza or to stop the war in Ukraine, the entire United Nations is judged by that. But it's not even the Security Council. It might just be a few powerful countries with the veto that are stymieing that kind of movement. But I would say this, Guyana's position is the United Nations has served us well. In peace and security, there were several instances where it was the UN who stepped in Timor-Leste, in Liberia, but in many other parts of the world as well. It was the United Nations where the whole decolonization process came to fruition. Guyana got its independence because of the United Nations on the decolonization, not only Guyana, several other countries. Humanitarian assistance. The UN is the first to respond on many occasions when there's war, when there's disaster. And so the UN has served the world well. But we're in the 21st century. And like any organization, and this one is 80 years old, we need to look at what we need to do better, what we need to change. And we're at that point right now, looking to see how we can make the United Nations more fit for purpose. I would say that the great majority of countries in the high-level week debate said, if we did not have the UN, we will have to create it. And that is because they have faith in the United Nations. But they also said, let us look at how we could make this organization work well. But I would say to those who criticize the United Nations, please know where the fault lines are. And many times it is not in the majority of the countries.
Do you think that change or that time for introspection should entail or include a look at the imbalance of power? And I'm speaking specifically to the veto power. Do you think it needs to be restructured, expanded?
Definitely. In fact, we had a debate a few weeks ago. It was under the presidency of the Russian Federation, and it was about the future of the United Nations. And I said, on behalf of Guyana, of course, let us start right here in the Security Council to reform the Security Council and make it more representative and more democratic. You have a Security Council where the entire African continent and Latin America and the Caribbean are not represented in the permanent category. For Africa, it's actually a historical injustice. and that should be fixed. And also, you have a situation where you have overrepresentation by certain geographical groups as well. So we need to look at that. So I agree completely. We need to reform the Security Council, but also in terms of how it makes decisions. You should not have, there's no other organization, international organization, where one country can kill a decision. You do not have that. And so we have to perhaps, if you cannot abolish the veto, because I do not believe that's possible. Nobody gives up power. But we should find a way of having a higher threshold for when the veto cannot be a veto. Right now, you can veto whether they're 14, 13, 11 supporting. So I think that there are ways that we can do that. So yes, that would be the first thing.
And as we come to the close, I must ask about the Venezuela issue. Of course, you're well aware of the issues that we have with Venezuela and their spurious claims over the Essequibo region. Can you tell our audience a bit about what is being done through your office to champion our position and to raise awareness within the UN about Guyana's position?
Long before we went on the Security Council, the ministry, the government as a whole, we were working to ensure that countries of the world know what the story is. Because sometimes you have misinformation out there.
Yes.
And the first thing that we had to dismiss with was the fact that Venezuela was claiming, and still claims, that this is a problem of the colonists. It's a colonial problem. That is not true. Our border was settled in 1899. It was demarcated in 1905. It was accepted by both British Guyana and Venezuela. And it was the case until Venezuela raised it 60 years later through this spurious claim. So that was the first thing we had to dismiss with, so people to know the truth about this. When we were already elected to go onto the Security Council, Venezuela upped the ante. And we felt it was necessary to request a meeting of the Security Council. Remember, we were not a member yet, but we were an observer, because once you're elected to the Security Council, you start to observe from October to December. And so you're in the room where even private meetings are held, but you cannot speak. And so we asked for a meeting, and the council actually had a closed meeting. And we did not, it was the first time the council was meeting on Guyana, Venezuela. It so happened that we were going on to the council. And there was a discussion there, but the council at the time could not come out with a statement. There were some countries who felt that it's not such a big issue, that it's it can be. They did not believe that it required that kind of seriousness. Just a few. But once we were on the council, Venezuela then had this referendum and all these different things. And so this time we were on the council and we asked for a meeting. And the meeting was a private meeting where Venezuela could attend as well. And so we both spoke in that meeting. And on that occasion, the council issued a statement, which we were very pleased with, because it called on the parties, which includes Venezuela, to abide with the ICJ provisional measures that were announced. And because, even though it was a private meeting, the entire UN knew that the council was meeting on Guyana, Venezuela, I think it also gave us a second opportunity while there to let everyone know what was happening. And I can tell you that the support for Guyana and Guyana's position on this is widespread, because we have taken the route of international law, going to the ICJ. And let me remind that it was President Ramotar in 2014 that sent me to the Secretary General, I was Foreign Minister at the time, to Ban Ki-moon, to ask him to refer this matter to the ICJ. And in 2016, Secretary General Guterres followed through with that decision. But a lot of work was done in between that. And countries respect when you go the route of international law, and that is what, and we're hoping for excellent outcome because we know we're on the right side in this matter.
Thank you, Ambassador. Finally, your closing remarks on how Guyana's diplomatic presence has been leveraged meaningfully in the past few years.
I would say that our foreign policy positions, by and large, Guyana's foreign policy positions, by and large, have been supported by all the parties in Parliament. So on the Venezuela matter, we always were at one as a country in the Parliament. But on many other issues as well, we have to see how that would fare now, given the makeup of the Parliament. But Ghana has held its own throughout the years as a small country. And we must see this in the context that we're just over 50 years old as an independent country. You would recall we had a Guyanese, Sir Sridat Ramphal, as the Commonwealth Secretary General. We had Ambassador Patrick Gomes, who was the Secretary General of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of countries. We were just elected with another national to ICA as well. And Guyanese have held several positions, worldwide. So our diplomatic reach has, I would say, been good, and it has expanded now. Because for you to be elected to a position, countries have to not only trust your candidate, but your country as well, because we have to go out there and campaign. We were on the ICJ as well several years ago. And if you look at what has happened in the recent years, you had President Jagdeo, a champion for climate, resulting in his being awarded Champion of the Earth. And that advocacy that we did, and we didn't have oil then, that advocacy resonated throughout the world. I remember the number of meetings he was being asked to address, the number of places to go, and so on. It was phenomenal. And then, as I mentioned, we had the decision of President Ramotar to go to the ICJ. That was a really good decision as well, diplomatically. And I think we were able to get that kind of support from within the UN as well, because of how we carried ourselves in the diplomatic arena. President Ali has become the voice on reparations for slavery. He is the voice on food security, and President Jagdeo had started that as well. President Ali has taken this as well to another level. His advocacy on biodiversity as well, and importantly, on the having a just transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. That has resonated as well. And our job as diplomats out there is to ensure that our advocacy on those issues are always aligned. It's our job to make sure that we advocate for the same things as well, but also to make sure we are part of the discussion when global decisions are being framed. So when the UN was working on the convention, for example, on boundaries beyond national jurisdiction, Guyana was very present there. The various other conventions that have been worked on in the years gone by, Guyana was there. Whether just as Guyana or with CARICOM, we are the coordinator for CARICOM on Security Council reform as well at the United Nations. And all the work that my colleagues do in the other missions as well, I think has all put Guyana on the international stage in a major way. We have many eyes on us now as well, that we have oil. But long before oil, I think we held our own, and I think oil has only brought another level of lubrication, as it were, for our expanded diplomatic presence.
Ambassador, it was such an honor and a pleasure to engage you today. Thank you for sharing insights about your life, your journey on this diplomatic course that you're on, and we here at Starting Point wish you the very best in your journey.
And thank you, Guyana, and all the best to Starting Point to keep telling the stories.
Thank you so much. To our audience, thank you as well for tuning in. I'll see you next time, same place, with more insights from thought leaders around Guyana. I'm Kiana Wilberg, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Starting Point. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for critical updates and exclusive content.